It's very important to have this meeting a year after the war started. I remember the last year edition when we were here together trying to make last-minute efforts to stop the war starting. And at that time I was discussing about the importance of the Black Sea in that sense. And I was saying at that time that what happens in the Black Sea does not stay in the Black Sea. And unfortunately, this is what happened. And the war in Ukraine and the war Russia started against Ukraine is not just a war against Ukraine. It is a war against our freedom. It is a war against our values as democratic community. And it is a war against the core parameters of the European security architecture.
And you mentioned last year, and Volodymyr Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, was here, and they were at the same time. Russia continued to lie until the very last moment, saying there are no plans for an invasion. Obviously, now it's clear that that was a big lie. There was a big, massive invasion. Taking all of this into account and assuming that Russia's not negotiating on good faith, that they want a military win, how do you make sure the opposite happens, that it's Ukraine that emerges with a victory here?
Because the stakes are that high, not just for Ukraine, but the whole security architecture of the Euro-Atlantic space. I think it's extremely important that Ukraine wins. And this win is not just about Ukraine itself, it's about our values, and it's about our security as a whole. That's why Ukraine has to be supported now. And that's what Romania is doing. Romania is has the largest border as a NATO and EU member state with Ukraine. And we have been at the forefront of the effort to cope with the effects of the war in Ukraine since the very day one of the war. Basically, Romania has welcomed across its borders more than 3.5 million Ukrainian refugees. And we have welcomed them with the hearts and arms open. Basically, we have provided free accommodation, free access to medical care, free access to schools, free transportation, everything that was needed in order for them to feel safe. At the same time, we have provided humanitarian help, and we have created a hub in the northern part of Romania in order to facilitate the transit of international humanitarian aid to Ukraine. This is functioning very well already since March last year. More than 70 convoys with humanitarian aid have transited that hub to Ukraine. And then it was the facilitation of grain transit. Romania has acted as a very responsible neighbor of Ukraine, and we have transited more than 13 million tons of grain and agricultural products through Romania, which is around 60% of the whole amount which was transited through the solidarity lanes of the European Union.
And I just want to ask you, I know you have a policy where you don't mention specifically the military aid that you provide for obvious reasons. It's a sensitive, delicate issue. You also mentioned this big border that you have, your location, geographical location. But overall, not specifically Romania, but overall, the entire West, collective West, the Ukrainians have said we need much more. Ammunition could become a problem. The long-range missiles, those are needed to deoccupy some of the areas in the east. The fighter jets is an ongoing debate. In your view, again, without getting into the specifics of what you do, I know you're not going to talk about that, but should the West be doing much more and faster? When I say faster, I mean in the next few weeks. There's a sense that something is happening now.
I think it is crucial that in the next weeks and months, the West provides all necessary support to Ukraine. And this is the effort that we are undertaking all together now. And it's a collective effort in order to make Ukraine able to defend itself against the Russian invasion. So I think indeed the next weeks and next months are crucial for the fate of the war.
So you believe the next few could decide the way this ends?
I think this period of time is extremely important.
And I want to ask a very blunt question on Ukraine. And some of your neighbors have said the reason why Ukraine has to win, it cannot fall, is because Vladimir Putin will continue. If he's successful in Ukraine, he will continue further into Europe. That puts a spotlight on Moldova, but not just that. There's a question of what happens to the Baltics, Poland, and so on. Do you really believe Vladimir Putin, with an army that has struggled so much for a year and has barely advanced, has the capacity to actually do that? Is there a threat that this goes beyond Ukraine?
There is a temptation that might appear that, if Russia is successful in Ukraine, which I'm confident that it will not, but this temptation might exist, that, to see whether it can do more. But at the same time, we have to be aware that one of the effects of the war that Putin started in Ukraine was that the transatlantic unity is much solid than before, and that we were able to take very bold and determined decisions, for instance, within NATO during the last Madrid summit in June. And these decisions consolidated the deterrence and defense posture on the eastern flank. So, as a result of the war, our security, paradoxically, is stronger as far as NATO allies. So I don't think Russia dares challenging NATO, because I think he fears NATO. NATO is the most powerful alliance in history, and I think the power of NATO cannot be matched with the power of Russia.
So you say the power of NATO cannot be matched by Russia?
Absolutely.
In real terms, if you strip away the propaganda, that's the reality.
Absolutely, and I think Russia and Putin knows very well that this reality does not allow Russia to move forward towards NATO countries. And this is a security guarantee that we enjoy in Romania as a country on the eastern flank, in the southern part of the eastern flank, at the Black Sea, which was declared by the new strategic concept of the region of strategic importance for the Euro-Atlantic security. So I think despite the fact that the overall security environment in Europe, in the region, has deteriorated, as a matter of fact, the security of the alliance has increased.
Do you want to see more NATO presence in whatever form? And I wonder what plans you may have for the medium term in Romania, because when you hear from your Polish colleagues, they say, of course, we want to see more. The best deterrence against Russia is to show NATO has a big presence in many ways.
Indeed, we need a stronger deterrence and defense.
And that means what specifically?
Means that we have to implement strictly the decisions that we have taken in Madrid. For instance, the assignment of specific reinforcement forces to the battle groups which were created last year. This is one great achievement of last year. The creation of the battle groups also in the southern part of the eastern flank, including in Romania. Due to that, we have more troops as before. We have more than 5,000 allied troops, especially American, but also French and also Belgium and other countries. We are grateful to these allies for their presence in Romania. At the same time, we need to have this assigned reinforcements. We need prepositioning of equipment. This was decided in Madrid, and we need to fully implement these decisions by the Vilnius summit. So what we need is a stronger defense, because stronger defense makes stronger deterrence.
And
this can mean also more troops, can mean also more equipment. Prepositioning of equipment means, in fact, more equipment of the Allied forces on the territory of the countries on the eastern flank, including in Romania.
And what about the nuclear deterrence? I know it's a very delicate issue, but some say it does work to the extent that Russia knows this nuclear threat just doesn't go one way, it goes both. Is that something that perhaps should be considered too?
Well, I think any kind of nuclear threat by Russia should be met with full condemnation. And we have done that before. We are continuing to do it. And I think it would be irresponsible from a country, even if it is Russia, and even if it is in war, but because it is a member of the Security Council, a permanent member, to use this threat. And this kind of threat would be irresponsible in itself.
And just as a final question, you mentioned the Security Council. At this point, it is pretty obvious Russia has been isolated from the usual diplomatic channels. Is there a point where you say, just get them out? I mean, all they do is veto or essentially say there isn't a war, or they just don't communicate in a way that's even applicable now to the West? Or do you still need some form of communication, even if until now it has not resulted in anything concretely?
Well, forms of communication are needed always, but at the same time it is difficult, if not impossible, to exclude a permanent member from the Security Council, because this is dealing with, it has to deal with the modification of the UN Charter, which is a very difficult process. So we have to be realistic in that regard. At the same time, the isolation of Russia at international level is a fact, and we will continue to act for isolating Russia even more.
And just as a final question, I know it's not exactly your portfolio. Obviously, you look at defense, but there is also a debate inside yesterday in this conference about who's going to pay for this reconstruction of Ukraine and what is the responsibility Russia should have. And I spoke to Valdis Dombrovskis of the European Commission, and he was very clear. He said the person that created the damage, that did a full-scale invasion, that's Vladimir Putin, and Russia should pay for this. There is no reason why Europeans should pay for the damage, the complete damage that Vladimir Putin has created. Are you in favor of that? And that means the confiscation too of assets from Russia.
Well, I think the position, as it was expressed, the principle of this, which is behind this position, is very correct. The one who has
made them pay.
The one who has created the destruction, the one who has started the war, has to pay for the destruction of the war. At the same time, if we take the issue of using the frozen assets, well, this is something that the lawyers have to basically clear, because this is a very. Well, it is an option, but at the same time, it has to have a very solid legal basis.